Всем привет! С вами The Station, ребята, и сегодня у нас в гостях писатель Black Library Петер Фехервари. Вы, наверное, уже смотрели другие репортажи с этим замечательным человеком, который приехал к нам в Петербург, в издательство «Фантастика», на фестиваль StarCon, чтобы рассказать вам, дорогие наши, о том, что же такое творится в его маленьком мире темного клубка. Вы наверняка знакомы, или иначе бы просто не смотрели это видео, с его творчеством «Каста», «Огня», «Инфернальный реквием». Вот это все классное, крутое. Куча шорт-сторис, которые мы даже пересказывали некоторые. В общем, все это очень интересно, все это очень свежо, классно. И хочется узнать немножко больше об этом замечательном человеке, с которым мы провели много времени. И теперь пора бы немножко прям погрузиться в его творчество, немножко в его голову. Петер любит «Сталкер». Фильм «Сталкер». И в этом фильме во многом посвящаются вопросы маленького человека в большом непонятном мире. Так вот вопрос. У него больше в творчестве проявляется интерес к большому герою и его проблемам, или наоборот, к маленькому герою, который предстоит перед чем-то большим?
Peter, we know you love the movie Stalker by Andrei Tarkovsky very much, and one of the themes in this movie is the problems of a small little man in a big unknowable world. So out of this, we want to ask you, do you like more to write about small-scale characters or about big-scale characters, well-known giant characters with big personalities?
So I think you can probably guess the answer to that straight off. Is for me, I'm very much more interested in real people, real characters, small people in situations that for small people are terrifying and frightening. This isn't to say that I dislike Primarchs, it isn't to say that I dislike chapter masters, but I'm much more interested in what goes on in the mind of a human in an impossible nightmarish situation, an impossible world. That's my preference. So, small in a big world.
Отлично. Второй вопрос. По его мнению, может ли автор, который является человеком обычным, писать о чем-то божественном, о чем-то космогонического масштаба, о какой-то сущности божественной? Как, например, это делают в «Ереси Хоруса».
Peter, you're a human, and you're an author. What do you think? Can human author write correctly about something divine, something cosmogonic, something deity, something on the galactical scale? You're just a human.
So, I mean, the first thing I should say there is you have made two assumptions. Which there are many people who might say you aren't an author, you are very, very strange and out there, and I wouldn't consider you to be a real author. So let's go on the assumption that I'm trying to be an author and I'm trying to get somewhere. The fundamental simple answer I use is imagination. The whole point of being a writer is that you can put yourself into the mind of, first of all, another person. You need to be able to make the step into someone in a different, say, class or culture, a different race, a different sex, a different land, a different world. All of that requires imagination. All of that requires you to step out from your own limitations, your own experience, and go further. Therefore, the process, it's a logical step beyond. So some creatures, for example, are a gene stealer. You think downwards, you think in terms of primal appetites. Much harder, as you've asked me, is when you try and go up and be divine. So for me, the closest I've come to that is writing Tau Ethereal, which I finally tackled in The Greater Evil. And it took me a long time to work up the confidence to actually try to write an ethereal, because I felt the balance for that cast needed to be, in my opinion, there needed to be a sense of something which is truly wise, sees the world in a totally different way, but is still in some sense comprehensible, or is going to be a rubbish story. The solution I used with the ethereal was I used Zen mysticism as a starting point. So I think a lot of people are using Zen and Asian culture in some form with the Tao. With the ethereal, I thought, Zen, I've read a lot of Zen mysticism, I've studied it a fair bit, and there's always a perception, this is very interesting, this is saying something really profound. I'm not quite sure what. I'm still trying to work it out. And so I wrote the ethereal's mindset with that sense of someone who's circling around the truth, never quite talking about the truth. There's a lot of metaphor, there's a lot of abstraction around it, and then you create something which feels mysterious, which feels intriguing, but isn't. I'm not actually the ethereal. The second thing I'll say with this, and then I'll move on, but this is a question I find very interesting, Ivan, is I personally believe in most cases, and I tried it with with the Tao Ethereal, in most cases with a superior being, something which is on that other level, it's generally a good idea not to write from their POV,
like
from within. Exactly. But for the most part, you're better off being on the outside, someone looking at them and talking about them. And I'll stop there because I could talk about this one for a long time.
Любимый бог хаоса. Очень простой вопрос.
Who is your favorite chaos god?
Tzeentch. It's a simple answer to that. There are things about all the chaos gods that I find interesting. I find Nurgle aesthetically so repulsive that there's a lot of story, visual with him immediately, and I like the notion of endurance. I like the notion that this isn't just plague and disease, this is surviving and handling it. So there's something interesting in that. But Tzeentch is the chaos power which I would align with if I lived in 40k. Basically, I'm fascinated by the idea of pure, perfect knowledge, of making sense of the world, of making sense of reality. So Tzeentch.
Хорошо. Другой вопрос у нас еще более простой на самом деле и для разрядки. Понравился ли тебе, Петр, в Петербурге и чего ты ждал от этой поездки? Возможно, каких-то стереотипов.
Okay, Peter, how do you like St. Petersburg? And what did you expect from your trip in Russia? Where were some stereotypes you faced in St. Petersburg during these 2 days?
So the simple first part of that answer, St. Petersburg is extremely beautiful. In honesty, I knew it was going to be extremely beautiful because I have friends who've been to St. Petersburg and have told me it's extremely beautiful. But even with that preparation, what surprised me more than anything else was how big everything is. So there's this wonderful imperial scale to the roads, this imperial scale to the squares. So I saw things which in a way aesthetically were quite familiar, but on a wonderfully expanded scale, and there's this incredible richness of detail. Amongst other things, Ivan took me to the metro, and the metro, Ivan, that blew me away. If you ever see a London metro, an average London metro, you do not expect to see a metro station with glass columns and these incredible mosaics. So aesthetically, I find the city beautiful. The second part of the question, again, I am a very international person. My parents were refugees from Hungary, from under the Soviet Union. In honesty.
Okay.
But so I grew up with parents who fled Soviet rule, essentially. But I also happened to have a father who was an extremely wise man, and a father who had Russian friends. One of his colleagues worked at the Hermitage, and his message was always that you deal with people as people. And Russian people as individuals, there tends to be a great warmth and a great passion, and I think that's one of the reasons why we've connected with the stories is that hopefully we resonate on that level. So I came here honestly with no real negative perceptions. We can talk about politics, but we won't. But I didn't come here, I don't know how much I could say, I didn't come here expecting to meet Vladimir Putin. I came here expecting to meet Warhammer fans, who, as far as I'm concerned, are Warhammer fans. We are people who love science fiction, we're people who love stories. So I came with no preconceptions. This is an interesting question, so I'm sticking with it a little bit longer, if you don't mind.
That's great.
What I found interesting was when I met you, Ivan, and Konstantin even more so, you guys thought I would have perceptions. You guys thought I would have more of this negative perception. The reality of it is, most of us in England who are reasonably educated just do not have that negativity about Russian people. Most of us, our negativity about the regime but we also hate our own government with a passion. It's more a case of mostly around the world there are good people living under not so good people. That's what I expected to find when I came out here, and from the welcome and the incredible warmth and friendship I've had, and all around me, that's what I've seen, and it's been a great privilege. Long answer, but important question.
Obviously, yeah.
Thank you for your answer. So warm here.
No, mate, you know,
I'm shy.
No, don't be shy. I've appreciated it.
Теперь серьезные вопросы. About your books.
Yes.
Фанат ли ты ответов на вопросы в своих книгах? И что важнее для тебя, форма или содержание?
Do you prefer to provide answers in your books, or you're more like David Lynch, who never answers to anything? And the second one, what's more important for you, the form or the essence?
Okay, let's take those in two parts. First of all, I think anyone who's read my books knows the answer to that. I don't really like giving answers. I like giving answers that are questions, and I like creating new questions. It's been said about my books that when I give an answer, I usually end up giving 3 questions for it. This isn't me being lazy as a writer. This isn't me not wanting to tie things up. I passionately believe that an author writes best when he shares an experience with the reader. So when I write a book, and I don't write many, and I find it very hard to do, for me, I find writing, I do it as a passion, not as a job. I couldn't do it as a job. I want to write something that the reader can pick up, think about, take away with them, interpret, ideally argue about. So there are certain things within Firecast particularly where there was I'll say one geeky, very specific thing, Iverson shooting Reeve, whether Reeve was good or bad.
Yeah.
I could have answered it. There were many opportunities to answer it. If I'd done that, if I'd given the answer, it would have lost its power.
Absolutely.
Either way, I would have either made this stupid or just. This way, it's a mystery. So what I want is for the books to be alive in people's minds. I'll say just a couple more things on this because again I'm passionate. You can edit it out if I'm going too far.
Okay.
One of the first influences on me was that Tarkovsky film, Stalker. I saw Stalker when I was a child, far too young. You shouldn't be watching Stalker when you're about 11 or 12. And I watched this film and it felt like nothing happened. It was just people wandering around and talking in a strange place. And at the end of it, they're in a room where it's raining. And I went away from it going, what did I watch? Several hours of what? And it wouldn't go away. It just stayed with me, this thing of, what was this about? What was this about? And that kind of became my passion. I wanted to be able to create that feeling, that question where, I'm going to even say this as well because this is important, is I believe the writer has a responsibility, if they do this, to put all the pieces of the puzzle before the reader. So there are pieces there for you to work with, there are pieces for you to look at and study and assemble and try out, but the conclusion, the way you assemble them, the way you make sense of it is yours. And so I could give you an answer on something, that's only my answer. It's no more valid than yours. So there you go, this one is something I'm very passionate about because this drives some people mad. So more like David Lynch, thank you. What's your next one?
What's more important, the form or the essence?
Do you mean the style or the substance?
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, I would say in general, substance is more important for writers in general. For me, the style and the substance are intimately linked.
Intertwined.
They're completely linked. So a lot of what I do is wordplay, a lot of what I do is symbolism. So the style and the substance, and this is why it's a nightmare for you to translate things sometimes, because the way things feel, the way things are described, informs the substance. Let me just extend on that one little bit more. I tend to write books, we have an expression in English called the God's eye view, where a scene or a story is told from an overarching entity that sees the world in an objective global way. I don't like that, I don't have it in my story. Generally, every scene is written from the perspective of an individual. To do that correctly, you have to have style. So the scene is written in the voice, or rather the mind of that person, You can only achieve that with style. That's why within Firecast you have Templeton, who speaks like H.P. Lovecraft, writes crazy poetry, drives some critics mad because they say I've gone way too flowery. That's the character. And then at the same time I have someone like Audie Joyce, who is slightly mentally not the sharpest and speaks more like a naive child in a way. And trying to do that, you can only achieve that by marrying style and substance.
I use some village slang for Audie in Russian translation.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Thanks.
And it gives it a little bit of comedy and flavour, but it makes it much harder to write. It means it takes longer to write, and it also means that the stories are not necessarily as easy to get. So I remember reading some Black Library stories where it's 3 imperial fists rose over the sand dunes on their motorbikes. Their names were... I just won't do that kind of thing.
Может ли он рассказать нам о следующей книжке?
Can you talk us something about your next book for VBL, or it's just top secret?
It's not so much top secret as in everything I write for BL is there's always a sense of the unknown as to whether it will go through or not. It usually does, but it can take a very long time. And this one it ties into Requiem Infernal. So with Requiem Infernal was a prequel to Gene Stealer Cults. This is a kind of prequel to Requiem Infernal. And what I can say is it's the book that finally talks about the angels resplendent. So this is my first Astartes dedicated book. And it's something that I've felt since The Crown of Thorns I need to write about. I after finishing Requiem, honestly, I was thinking I don't want to write another book for a while. It isn't what I normally do, but there was this big gap. And so this is my chance to write about the Angels Resplendent culture, their history, their lore, their philosophy, their organization. They call their companies rhapsodies. So there's an enormous amount of lore building.
To give substance to the chapter.
And to give substance to the chapter. And also to solve some of the things that haven't made sense in the past. But it's a weird as hell story, so it might never happen. So sorry if it doesn't.
Space Marines. I hope it's without water porn.
I joke. No,
It's
well,
better talking
do you
about
honestly think?
I know your answer.
Do you think? No, I think I got to something like halfway through the book before a shot was fired. That's kind of where I'm. And then I realised, oh, there's not very much action going on. No, this is a lot of it is about someone searching for the Space Marine chapter and trying to make sense of it, going on a journey. And the beginning, the structure of it is more like Tarkovsky's Stalker, is the truth. So it's a weird as hell book, and because of that, you might never see it.
Ну, подождем, выйдет, и тогда узнаем. Фехервари Space Marine, это ух прям. Ну что, в жизни увлечения какие-то помимо Warhammer?
Do you have any hobbies beyond Warhammer?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't play Warhammer, so that's never really been a game. I've never really been into straightforward tabletop wargaming. I do collect the models, or rather I've been admiring Ivan's amazing paint jobs, his collection.
Thank you.
I've been collecting models since I was about 10, so I started collecting them. I stopped about 10 years ago because it was crazy. I used to paint them, and I played RPGs, and I played weird RPGs that combined the models with stories. So essentially a lot of the Dark Coil, a lot of that storytelling comes from me being a games master. That was always one of my passions. My other very big passion, and where I really originally planned to go, is filmmaking. So I began by writing short scripts, making short films, making strange films, making long films. I'm a cameraman, I'm a lighting man, and I'm an editor. By profession, I became, so my hobby within hobby filmmaking became my career as a professional editor, so they kind of linked. I play computer games, and I'm a philosopher by training, so I'm very interested in that. I continue to pursue that. Those are my hobbies, those are my passions. I hate bloody sport with a passion. Sport can go to hell.
Yeah, you were forced to play football in school, right?
Ah, it was torture. So being forced to play football, I'm sorry, I have these traumatizing memories of as a kid being told, go out in the winter wearing shorts. And I go, why? Why should I take off long trousers, put on short trousers when it's bloody freezing cold? This is idiotic. And then, as we all know as well, PE teachers, games teachers, they're sadists, they're psychopaths. Their whole purpose in life is to harass kids and make their life misery. Negan from The Walking Dead, you know his background, he was a PE teacher. Yeah, he's a PE teacher. They haven't shown it in the series, but they nailed it with that. That was spot on. So yeah, that inured in me a permanent hatred of sport. I'll also say as well, I write really weird stuff, but that weird stuff, it doesn't come from alcohol or drugs.
Not even from smoking.
Or from smoking. It comes from being a weird person and listening to a lot of weird music.
Следующий вопрос. Ну, мы как-то пошли в серьезные вопросы. Надо как-то градус, наверное, сбавлять. Вот спроси Юра. Членский билет-то у него в Black Library есть? Раз туда ходит-то?
Really? Do you have a member card with the Black Library?
Раз туда ходит.
I used to, but they revoked it because I was too heretical. So basically, well, no. I mean, the thing is, I would visit the Black Library without kind of the unofficial permit, and I would remove books. And I'll be honest, when I didn't like them, I would just kind of like edit out bits of the text. I've been trying to change the history that Magnus was right.
Some small footnotes.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And so I don't have the best relationship with the Harlequins at the moment, unfortunately. I have to say.
You refused to write a short story about them, as I remember, right? You choose guitarists.
Refused about Hurricanes?
No. I was so. After Vanguard, I had a fairly long hiatus with Black Library because we had creative differences over that one. And then they came to me with an offer. We can offer you a short story to go with one of the new codexes. You can have the Harlequins or you can have the Skitari. And aesthetically, I love them both. I think the Eldar are beautiful and fascinating, but truth to tell, I just don't know enough of their lore. And it's one of the richest, most intriguing lores, and then there's language tied into it. I spent a huge amount of time learning about the Tau before I felt confident to write about the Tau. And even then, I don't feel like I know as much as I need to with the new codex. The Eldar, with this ancient history, I was terrified to go near them, whereas the Skitari, this was effectively a brand new set of rules, a brand new set of lore. I wasn't sure about the new version of Skitari, but it grew on me as I read the codex. So yeah, the Harlequins, I think they're beautiful, I think they're fascinating, but I would be scared to write about them.
Okay.
Well, in Warhammer, as you guys will know, because to be honest, many of you will be more lore familiar than I am. If you get it wrong, you're going to upset people deeply, and I already get accusations of not really writing Warhammer. So the last thing I wanted to do is write about a faction and get it horribly wrong.
Софтхаммер. Что же такое софтхаммер? Поясню.
Primaris.
Новый Softhammer, it's a spoiler for my question. Тебе нравится больше новый Warhammer или старый Warhammer? Как ты относишься вот к так называемому мягкому Warhammer'у, который вот сейчас идет?
Okay, what do you love more, the new Warhammer or the old Warhammer? What do you think about the so-called soft Warhammer? The stuff is going on right now.
Softhammer.
Softhammer, yeah.
So, again, the simple answer to that is, for me personally, I'm an old Hammer person,
Obviously,
because it's what I grew up with. So my attraction to Warhammer 40k begins with Rogue Trader. It begins with this book that came out of nowhere, full of madness, where there was the phrase, "In a mad universe, only mad men prosper." That was what nailed Warhammer for me. My passion is the hopelessness, the bleakness, the savagery of that world, and yet people still try and exist. Coming back to the idea of small people in a big nightmare. So instinctively, Newhammer, I define Newhammer, this is just my personal opinion and this isn't a right or wrong, I define it as a greater hope for the Imperium. You now have, and my knowledge of it is fairly sketchy because I don't play the game and I don't write Newhammer books, is with the return of the Primarch, who no one knows quite how to say his name, Reboot Gilliman, it brings a lot of hope. You have someone who is quite rational and quite capable taking over. That to me suggests there might be more hope for humanity. I personally, I can see why that might work for getting more people in, but it isn't, for me, the way I would play it. To me, the Primarchs are gone. The Primarchs are dead or disappeared, for me personally. The Primaris, I personally know very little about. So I've almost deliberately, I've chosen to go back in time. Requiem Infernal is written in M40, so I've actually gone further back. My current story is even further back than that, because the new Warhammer, I don't know enough about it. I don't think it will be as nihilistic as dark. So
we have Imperium Nihilus on the other side.
Which sounds like it is, but it's because I don't play the game. I have no real, and I don't collect the miniatures anymore. I've stopped myself. They were like a drug, the miniatures. I had to stop myself from that. I filled one cabinet and said, "That's it, no more." So I haven't kept up with it, and I wouldn't want to try and write it.
Okay. You're a fan of old Warhammer, old grim dark. Bad people, bad decisions, bad leaders, bad life.
Yeah, but courage at the same time.
Yes, of course. Когда следующий вопрос. Раз вот такой вот темный, страшный Warhammer, Grimdark, кем бы вы были в Warhammer-то?
Peter, if you would have a power to become a character from Warhammer, who would you be?
Not of Hammer.
Not of Hammer, real Warhammer.
Obviously, I find writing stories about smaller characters more interesting, but I wouldn't want to be a small character in the Warhammer world. If it was actually me having to live this craziness and deal with it, I'm not going to choose a guardsman or a relatively low-ranking space marine. So, I mean, I may as well jump in and say then, in that case, yeah, hell yeah, I'd rather be a Primarch. It would be madness to be anything else. And given that my fascination is with Siege, and my fascination is with perfect knowledge, I mean, in real life, what I want to do is get a perfect answer to reality in the universe. I want to make sense of universe. I want to find the meaning of life. I want to find a way to reassemble reality in a way that's better. So for me, to be someone like Magnus would be my choice. The Thousand Suns philosophically are quite in line with a lot of what I find fascinating. The question would be, could you be Magnus without falling? I'm going to be hugely arrogant and say I'd try.
Does he won't be Magnus?
Well, I think Magnus doesn't think he's fallen anyway. Yeah, I think it's like, I mean, Ahriman is the other one. Ahriman is a character, he was my favourite of the followers. I love the idea about Ahriman believing that he isn't a tool of the Chaos Gods. So for me, that's the faction that appeals. That's the faction I would probably pursue if I had the choice. So if we lived in this world and there was access to chaos powers, I wouldn't really be a religious fundamentalist imperial. I would probably be a Thousand Suns.
Okay.
Ну, раз мы начали о Магнусе говорить, мы об этом позже продолжим, увидите. Если мы о Магнусе начали говорить, то вопрос злодея в твоем творчестве.
Peter, do you have real villains in your books?
No, generally not. I'm much more interested in shades of grey. So for me, I probably don't even have real heroes for the most part. It tends to be people have traits that are good and bad, and they can weigh one way or the other. So there are some people like, say, Iverson, to use a classic one, who is on a downward spiral and getting darker and darker as he goes. But right through to the end, even when he does some very bad things, he isn't a villain. Firecast, the so-called villain at the end, might arguably be right. So the gene stealers, the gene stealer cult, typically they would be a bad thing. I'd say the Tyranids are all out bad for humanity, but again, they're not a villain. So I tried to write the gene stealer cult as this, coming back to your idea about how do you write something that's alien and unknown. I wanted to write it as something that almost understands that it's about devouring and consuming and it's going to fall into it, and I wanted it to be tragic rather than all out evil. Requiem Infernal, I'll say a little bit with that. Requiem Infernal is in a way a study of flawed characters. So there's a key cast in that of very flawed characters who are all trying to do something that they believe is right. So there is the character who is trying to find perfect knowledge. There's the character who's trying to redeem past sins. There's the character who's trying to find his missing sister and make sense of an unjust universe. And then there's the guy who everything is kind of collapsing for him. He is diseased, and he won't give up. He carries on. All of these people are in a spiral that can take you into villain territory. But are they villains? Straight villains to me aren't interesting. It's even in someone who is a villain, there tends to be something redeeming. So for me, this is what I've tried to write. And I could talk about this subject, Ivan, I could talk about this so long, so I'll shut up.
Okay.
Ну что, хотел спросить, кстати, вот нравится ему изучать лор Вархаммера?
Do you like to study the Warhammer's lore, the background? Do you enjoy it?
I did enjoy it. I did enjoy it. So my first passion was reading the Rogue Trader background, which is like long ago, and then my new revised love for it began when the Index Astartes books appeared, which I still think are amongst the most classic lore books. And that I God knows, I read those a very long time ago, but that's where I fell in love with Warhammer lore all over again. That was when I actually discovered the Primarchs. That was when I discovered the origins of the different chapters. So that kind of lore is beautiful. I collect the codexes. I still collect codexes, and I read the lore parts and ignore the rule parts. So for me, if I'm totally honest, for me personally, I would prefer books of lore without rules, because that's the part that's fascinating. So yeah, I love lore, but there's so much to keep up with.
Ну хорошо, тогда, наверное, стоит такой легкий блиц-опрос сделать, ну, чтобы вы понимали. Самые важные вопросы русского комьюнити, они всегда на виду. Ну, на виду. Потыкай немножко чатиков, потыкай немножко форумов, подними некоторые паблики, и ты поймешь, что же волнует русское комьюнити больше всего. Начнем с самого простого. Магнус, он предавал или нет?
So you mentioned Magnus Verret. Is he a traitor or not?
Well, you kind of you can possibly partly conceive my answer from what I said before. I mean, let me answer it this way. I think the Emperor has a lot to answer for. I tend to blame a lot, for me personally, the way the Emperor behaved to the Primarchs was insane. So the Emperor essentially was provoking Primarchs to behave in very strange ways. The treatment of Magnus, I can't help but feel they could have sat down and had a chat before all this started. And the Emperor could have told Magnus his plan. Magnus would probably have been on board and a lot of problems would have been solved. And I feel that way about so much of it, but this is why let me just qualify this. I am not up to date with reading the Heresy. I am up to about book 13 or 14 because I was getting a bit unsure about it. But I like to think that Magnus was right. From what I know of it, I think Magnus was right. But then I support Magnus. I don't like the Emperor.
The question about Magnus is most toxic in our community.
Well, yeah, it's going to be because it's very divisive in terms of what the information is out there, and it has been portrayed in different places, in different ways. The truth of it is, when Magnus sent the message, as far as I'm going to go by Thousand Suns, when he sent the message, his intention was correct. It was intended as a warning, and there is this saying, in philosophy that it's your intent, not your action, that decides whether there's evil behind or not. You might cause evil, but it's what's your intent. So you could say it was a tragic mistake, which it was, but then who the hell is going to think that by sending a message you open a massive warp rift on Earth and create absolute chaos? It doesn't really make that much sense. You're not going to expect that to happen, to my mind. And as I said, if the Emperor had been a bit more honest and a bit more straightforward, he's created these guys who are super powerful, super intelligent, super ambitious, warlords, and then he doesn't talk to them. What? And like I say, this is. I know it's controversial, and different people will have different opinions. But to me, that's asking for trouble, Ivan. Is that not asking for trouble?
I don't think so.
Tell me that.
I think. Я так не думаю, что это произошло.
So we're diverting. If this isn't interesting, he'll let it out.
I think it's just a human step from him.
From the Emperor.
From the Emperor, yes. Human steps.
Human part of his personality.
Oh yeah, arrogance.
Humans in him. Yeah, human arrogance in him.
Yes.
Which makes him
human. Okay.
But he's too wise to be making such a foolish mistake. I know, you know, that if you have someone working for you who's ambitious and you mistreat them and you mess them around, there's a very good chance they're going to be disloyal. It's basic human nature. So I would say, if anything, that step isn't so much a human arrogance as unable to connect, unable to think on a human level and make sense of others. That would make more sense of it. There might be answers in books. For example, I have not read The Master of Mankind, and maybe The Master of Mankind would fill in some gaps that make sense of it.
It was ambiguous as hell.
Okay, I would say that's wise. I would probably keep it wise. You know what I'm going to say? This division and this violent disagreement about whether Magnus was right or wrong is what makes it so damn fascinating. Let's come back to the Lynch thing. If there was an absolute answer, Magnus was right or wrong, and we all felt the same way, it would lose its life. Currently we're all arguing. I'm getting passionate. You're very chilled, but you disagree with me. There's something about these mysteries that keeps it ferocious, that keeps it fierce. And because it's this legendary time, there is an argument about, should we have written about this so overtly anyway, or should it be more mythic? I think that it's great that we can sit here arguing about whether Magnus was right or wrong, and I think it's great that people can get passionate about it. I think it's really bad if people are actually losing friendships over it or coming to blows. You say it's very toxic in the community.
Yes.
Yeah, but why the hell are we letting it get toxic?
Because we are living in Russia.
Well, but it's not.
We like to argue with Shell. Really.
Yeah, people like to argue all over. But what I'm saying is, this is what's uniting us with this discussion, but with this disagreement, is that we are all passionate about the lore. We're all fascinated by Magnus and that question. And these things in Warhammer, these gaps, these holes, are what make it vibrant. This is why I strongly believe that mysteries, unsolved questions, are the most precious thing in a story, because they keep it alive, they keep it yours, and they keep us all debating and arguing. So, but I like Magnus, so I'm going to support Magnus, but I might be wrong. Maybe I'll read something else and go, but I still think the Emperor was...
It's your opinion. It's my most
opinion.
important.
Well, but the whole point, I don't believe in empty opinions. I believe people have a right to voice their opinion, but your opinion should be informed and it should be rational. There's no point in people just talking nonsense. So I look at the evidence I've got, and I make an argument based upon that. So it's not just empty, but because it's ambiguous, because there's enough uncertainty in it, there's room for disagreement. And I think what's coming out is people's innate opinions, their innate emotions, who they are, is infusing this argument. So it's making people more vibrant, and that's what art should be about. It should be that you present someone with something. This is why you could have an abstract picture that superficially looks ugly, that looks superficially meaningless. But if it raises a reaction in people, if it raises passions, then it's worked as art. So what I think would be sad is if we can't respect each other's disagreements.
I mean, hobbies are supposed to connect people.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, one of the things that I find wonderful about this is that you've invited me here to Russia to talk about something that was invented in like the 80s or 90s, and I'm also talking to someone in America who's in contact with someone in Russia about this stuff, and so we have these strange links and connections that cross boundaries, and we're talking the same language over it, and we're having those same arguments over it. That is wonderful, and I think that's one of the great things that's come out of Warhammer. It's reached that level of it's interesting because I say it's popular but also niche at the same time. So if you're a Warhammer fan, that makes you more niche than if you're a Star Wars fan. But we're still big enough that we connect across the world. But if we were all believing the same thing, it'd be boring. Sorry, that was an epic.
Yeah,
I think he'll have to chop stuff out of this.
Oh, I don't think so.
It was a little bit long for a blitz question, really.
It was a very interesting answer.
Okay, interesting.
Next question about Gilliman or Gulliman.
Okay.
I don't know.
You mentioned the 13th Primarch's name. There are a lot of ways to pronounce it. About Gilliman, Robuti Gilliman, I don't know, Robert Gulliman.
What do you prefer?
What do you prefer, yeah, really?
Personally, I so strongly dislike the name. It's one of my least favourite of the Primarch names. To me, I don't know about you guys, I find that when I first read a name, when I first come across it, the way I pronounce it is what sticks in my head. And then later on, I found this with words as well, just standard words. There's words in English which I read them when I was a child, and I read them the way they're written, and that sticks in my head. And then later on, I find out actually that's the wrong way to pronounce it, and I still can't change it because it's stuck in my mind.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid I read that name for the 13th Primarch as Reboot Gilliman, and I hated it. Your alternate pronunciations are probably better. Rabout
Gilliman. Yeah.
Rabout Gilliman sounds
aesthetic.
Kind of much better. Anyway, it sounds much better. But the truth is, so here's what I'm going to say: the Primarch of the 13th Legion, the most solid legion, the most dependable legion. It should be the legion that you look at and it makes sense. You know what they're about. There's no kind of strangeness and messiness about them. A name like Calgar to me was Marneus Calgar. Yeah, that to me is an ultramarine name. It's solid. It just immediately
monumental.
Yeah, it immediately makes sense. And again, a name like Cato Sicarius.
Yeah,
that's very ultramarine to me. So one of the things I personally don't like is if a legion is based around a certain kind of concept, like the Space Wolves are very specifically based around that kind of Viking Celtic, stick with it. The White Scars around the Mongolian, stick with it. So to me, the Ultramarines, personally, I think their Primarch should have had a clear Latin name, a strong Latin name. Reboot Gilliman, if I listen to that, I'm not sure what it is, but it sounds maybe
French.
Maybe French. Reboot sounds kind of French. Gilliman sounds kind of Spanish. It's just strange. So I'm pronouncing it my weird way. I'm giving you another super long answer.
Gilliman sounds like French name. Gilliman.
It does, but the Ultramarines don't seem French. The Ultramarines just don't seem French to me. So why have they got a French guy in charge? Why isn't the whole legion picking up the French
Roman.
vibe?
It must be Roman.
It should be Roman. It should be Roman. But the truth is, this is my impression, is that I suspect the Primarch names were, well, I know they were created long ago by people who were passionate about it at the time, probably weren't necessarily expecting that it would rise to this level. I mean, we were talking about this earlier, but I'm going to say it again. Ferrus Manus, to me, that it shouldn't be so on the nail. Whereas a name like Fulgrim, you listen to Fulgrim and there's something about it. To me, Fulgrim has always sounded quite corrupt. There's something decadent about it, but it's nothing. It's not an obvious thing. So the Primarchs, their names, I tend to have a 50-50 split as to how successful they are. But I'm the last person to ask how Reboot Gilliman is correctly translated. You could probably ask Black Library for the official translation. I suspect the key Black Library authors all had a chat about this and they came up with this is it.
А тут надо отметить, почему Феррус Манус кажется Петру таким смешным. По латыни Феррус Манус буквально значит «железные руки». Примарха железных рук зовут «железные руки». Это просто глупо.
Why?
Iron Hands.
Прямолинейно, слишком слишком просто.
Yeah.
Iron Hands.
But you see, I'm a heretic. I'm a heretic.
А спасибо вам большое, что дослушали, узнали много чего нового. Это был тяжелый день. Мы с Петером уже пятница, кусочек субботы. Спасибо ребятам большое, что приехали. Вот. И еще уже воскресенье. И завтра мы продолжим с Петером общение. И с вами, уважаемые дорогие наши, в Москве. Вот. Вы, наверное, это увидите уже постфактум, числа 2 где-нибудь июля. Вот, когда я уже там вернусь. Но так или иначе, надеюсь, вам понравилось. Это вот был Петер Фехервари, человек, который сделал «Темный клубок», который много чего интересного придумал. И я прям уверен, что большинству из вас понравились его ответы, и вы поняли, что это не простой автор болтер-порно, а автор, который любит старый Warhammer, любит гримдарк, ужасы, Лавкрафта, Тарковский, Кайдановский, Сталкер. Вот все вот это, то, что мы с вами любим, и то, что он с нами разделяет, в конце концов. В общем, настоящий фанат своего дела. Так еще и модельки как раз собирает, пульт даже не играет. Все, спасибо вам большое, всего доброго, goodbye.
Goodbye and thank you.